Howdy, boys and girls, and welcome back. It's World Series week. I have no idea what the number actually would be, and you will find that I may be a bit distracted as the Cubs are about to score again in Game 2. That's a problem. Anyway,
I say hi, Crappy. I'm down here.
Hi. We are going to talk about college football. I'm going to try to not watch too much of the baseball game, especially since Chicago just scored another run and now lead 3-0 in the fifth inning of Game 2. As we typically do, I'm going to ask you what you learned last weekend. But before I do that, I should offer my sincere and humble congratulations for Saturday's game in not so happy. I wasn't happy in Happy Valley. Penn State beating my Buckeyes. Did you enjoy that as much as I thought you might?
I did, although I will fully admit that I wasn't home for the first part of that game because
you said you get some stuff.
Yeah, I was at Bridgestone Arena watching the one time that the Penguins come to town.
Yes.
Because we get them one time a year, and we managed to score tickets like right before the game, and so we raced down to Bridgestone, and then they ended up. Gosh, the Pens look like garbage. I should have stayed home. They did. They looked awful.
It was a rough one.
Yeah, and I mean, it was weird to not be cheering when the Preds scored because the rest of the year I'm a Preds fan because, West, East, like, that's okay, unless they play each other. So it was really weird to not, because I was in all my Pens gear, and it was so weird to not be jumping up every time the Preds scored. I was like, nope, sit. I'm on the visiting side this time. But no, it was a good game, and so that was fun. So we came home. And I was watching the score on my phone, and I'm like, they're hanging in. And then by the time I got home is when they came back and took the lead. And my only regret in that game is that the game ended so late. I couldn't call my dad because his last time that happened, we were sitting next to each other, and Ohio State pulled that game out. But but we were sitting next to each other in a hotel like lobby area. We met halfway, and that was a cool experience. But better believe when I called on Sunday, that was the first thing he talked about. Like, did you see the end of that game? So yeah, big win for the Knits. Will it parlay into a better bowl game? Maybe. Are they going to get a New Year's Day game? Probably not. The Big Ten's too good this year. But hey, I'd be happy with a trip to the Outback Bowl, considering the way the season started. So we'll wait and see how the rest of the season plays out. But they've got to win out to get a good game. And that's I think that's possible. I mean, especially if you're looking at the division. The tough games are out of the way, assuming that Michigan State continues to be whatever it is that Michigan State is this season. Right.
So and certainly I know Ohio State still kind of controls its destiny as far as its postseason hopes go. So that's something that makes that a little bit easier to bear. I've mentioned this before. Ohio State's inexperience. It really felt like that on Saturday. That's the toughest road game, road atmosphere they face. And maybe it works out. We talk about Wisconsin. Maybe it works out. That's one of the best road teams they faced. So
yeah,
it's a tough place to play. And Ohio State looked rattled. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Learn from it and move on, and hopefully Ohio State will beat Northwestern this weekend. We have some other stuff to talk about, including the aforementioned Wisconsin Badgers. But before we get to them, we will start with number 4, Washington, at number 17, Utah. Washington is favored on the road by 10 or 10.5 points. I know I didn't especially take Washington seriously earlier in the season, and perhaps now I do. What do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what Washington's been able to do. Because you're right, I didn't take Washington seriously either. And until they started racking up points after points after points. I mean, this is what we're used to seeing out of the Pac-12, right? The Pac-12 has a reputation of big offense, no defense. I.e. Oregon Ducks from the last 10 years, something like that. I mean, that became the signature. Stanford had played defense well. They were kind of the abnormality, not the rule in that kind of situation. But my gosh, this Washington team is putting up Oregon-like numbers. Mm-hmm. I mean, you put this team in green and yellow, and rewind the clock 4 years, and you think you're looking at Oregon. Really, they're averaging a ridiculous 48-something points per game on offense, and they're blowing teams out. That's the thing. Like they struggled 1 week, but otherwise they're winning, and they're winning dominantly. Number 2 in the nation in passing, quarterback Jake Browning, 26 touchdowns. What's ridiculous about this stat, 26 touchdowns, okay, good quarterbacks are going to be at about that point right now. 2 interceptions all season long. That is absolutely ridiculous, to be this deep into the season and to have only thrown 2 interceptions, excuse me. So they have this high-powered offense, which we expect from the Pac-12. Okay, that's all well and good. But what they also have is the top-rated defense in the league. And I think that's how they've been able to have these spreads be as big as they are in all of their games, is that their defense is really, really good. Utah, there's a lot of interesting storylines in this game. Most of them are on the Utah side of the ball. First of all, game day is going to be there, and the game kicks at 12:30?
I think it's 8 o'clock in the morning at West Coast time.
Yeah, it's okay, so wake everybody up.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, for a West Coast game, that's absolutely absurd, especially a game between 2, highly ranked opponents. But yeah, the Utah story is really interesting this year. It's the Williams and Williams ticket. Quarterback Troy Williams actually started his career at Washington, which is interesting, and then transferred to Utah. So you think there's a little bit of a grudge there? Maybe.
Maybe.
And he's had a tough go of it the last couple weeks. But you could say the same thing for the entire Utah offense. They haven't looked great the last couple weeks, and even the entire season, they haven't had the dominance that Washington has had. Running back Joe Williams, this is a crazy story that kind of, unless you were kind of on the West Coast or really paying attention to college football, you missed the whole thing, that he actually retired from college football 5 weeks ago, or 7 weeks ago now. Because he had too many injuries. He had knee injuries, back injuries, all that fun stuff. Said, nope, I'm done. Football doesn't make me happy anymore. It hurts to play. He quit. Took some time off, was enjoying time with his fiance or his girlfriend. I don't remember which. But, just having normal life. And then he watched all of his teammates get hurt in one game and decided to come back. So he essentially took 5 weeks off and came back, and the first game back, he rushed for 179 yards. It's a crazy, crazy story. I found a really great story at Sports on Earth's. David Ubben wrote an incredibly good story. Go find that and read it, and it kind of goes through the whole thing. But yeah, the storylines are really, really great on the Utah side of the ball. I think Washington's defense is too good and Washington's offense is too good. I think Washington wins this game, but it's one of those weird. We haven't seen that weird up topsy-turvy kind of thing happen yet in the Pac-12. This would be a prime candidate for that. Mm-hmm. And you better believe that if Utah doesn't win this game and they still find a way to win the South, which they could, you better believe that they're going to take notes for when they meet again in the Pac-12 championship game, which could happen in 5 weeks. So really interesting game, but I think Washington wins.
Okay. You mentioned something about Washington's offense and scoring nearly 50 points a game. And that is very Pac-12-esque. And you look at that, and they had been doing that. I didn't really start paying attention to the Huskies until after the Stanford game. I picked Stanford was kind of my Pac-12 horse to ride early in the season. And
sorry about that.
Well, who knew they could play the game at Washington and got absolutely smoked. And then you start paying attention to the Huskies, and you mentioned scoring almost 50 a game, nearly 500 yards a game. But the thing is, they're giving up just over 14 points a game. Mm-hmm. So this is a defense that perhaps the West Coasters aren't accustomed to seeing. This is an interesting. It is especially interesting in that it is at this point the logical Pac-12 championship game preview. Although both teams, Washington still has Washington State, which is a rivalry game, and Washington State is no slouch. Colorado in the in Utah's division. They have both those teams have those games remaining, so there could be some changes there. I don't see Washington, however, veering from its path to the division title at least, and then we'll see what happens in the championship game. The Huskies are too much for the Utes at this point. This would be a fun game to watch, but I think Washington wins this one pretty easily. Next up. We have the suddenly resurgent Nebraska Cornhuskers, number 7 at number 11 Wisconsin. Wisconsin is favored by 8.5 to 9 points. What do you think?
Yeah, so all those people that said that Mike Riley was a terrible hire for Nebraska, what are you thinking now, right?
Just gotta have a little time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, was he the sexy hire? No, absolutely not. Mike Riley but he's a good guy, and
he's pretty much the antithesis of the sexy hire, actually.
Yeah, exactly. He's quiet, he's well spoken, he's well mannered, but he gets the job done, and he had some pretty good, just some good years at Oregon State. Everybody kind of scratched their head when he was hired, but yeah, it's panning out pretty well. That he fits. Maybe his coaching style fits just a little bit better. In the Big Ten than it did out west in the Pac-12. Nebraska's getting a lot of key players back. They've been hit with the injury bug, even though they're undefeated. They get wide receiver Jordan Westerkamp back this week, which is huge for Tommy Armstrong. Tommy Armstrong, I think he's going to be our new guy of wait, he's still playing college football, right? Like he feels like hasn't it felt like he's been here forever?
Yes.
But he's had one of these types of careers, it's like it's good Tommy, bad Tommy. And this year so far, it's been all good Tommy Armstrong. He's had not a stellar year, not a consideration for a Heisman kind of year, but he's had a really solid, steady year to get the Huskers to 7-0. The big problem here is the fact that if you watched any of the Nebraska-Purdue game last week, you realized that the Nebraska offensive line struggled big time against Purdue, which is a bit concerning when you're going up against a defense like Wisconsin. That's not a good combination. And the other thing that Nebraska has going against it is the fact that, we talk about that defense. Wisconsin has the number 4 scoring defense in the country. So it's going to be a tough slog for this Nebraska offense. And we keep talking about Wisconsin to flip the sides here about the, Badgers are still annoying. They've played some tough games this year. I mean, this is their 5th game out of 8 that they will be facing a top 10 opponent. I mean, I didn't look at strength of schedule, but you've got to think they're one of the top in the country right now with the opponents that they faced. It's got
to be top 5, if not number 1.
If not number 1, right?
The schedule they've had to play is ridiculous.
It's insane.
It's impressive for them to be where they are right now.
It is, and and they had 2 heartbreaking losses against your Bucks and Michigan. I mean, you couldn't play those 2 teams any better. So, I mean, this is a very, very good Wisconsin team that actually their defense is really, really good, but they're struggling a bit on defense with injuries because they've had to play these tough opponents. They're getting beat up and losing Jack Sitchie for the rest of the year. That's tough to lose your standout linebacker for the rest of the year, and the rest of the defense is banged up quite a bit. Wisconsin, though, is going to need Hornibrook to play well in this because Nebraska does have a solid rush defense. It might be a long day for Corey Clement. I don't know. He's a big back, though. I think he might be able to wear them down. I'm with you on this a little. I know that Wisconsin is technically ranked lower, but I think if Nebraska is this is the first super huge hurdle for Nebraska this year. I don't know. Wisconsin playing at home, Camp Randall under the lights, that's tough. It's a tough environment. And Wisconsin's defense, I think Wisconsin wins this game. I think the line is right here. I also think this is probably going to be the most entertaining game of the weekend. If you like Big Ten football, I think.
Better qualify that.
Yeah, if you like Big Ten football, I think this is going to be the closest game of the weekend. I really
Okay.
do, because these two teams are pretty evenly matched. So I think this is going to be, compared to the other two games we're talking about this week on the show, I think this one's going to be the closest game, closer to being a coin flip than the other two. But I'm going to give the edge to the home team and say the Badgers are still going to be annoying.
It never ends. The Badgers are, as we discussed previously.
Hey, at least we're not talking about Tennessee this week.
They are, yeah, that's true. They are always annoying. It's funny. I think last maybe a couple weekends ago, or no, it was last weekend when Nebraska broke into the top 10 after getting to 7-0. Was looking at some stuff on the college football Reddit board, and Nebraska fans were talking about the fact that they're probably the worst top 10 college football team of all time. And that's a little fan angst for you, but it actually sort of feels that way, or at least it seems that there's a lot that we don't know about them, especially for being in the second half of being close to the end of October. I think we do have a pretty solid idea of what Wisconsin is, and perhaps more so than I had given them credit for before Ohio State went up there. They do have a Wisconsin-like rushing game. Maybe not the Heisman caliber back, maybe not super physical guy, but the rushing game is there. The defense obviously has been a strength of theirs all season long. 8.5 points, 9 points sounds about right to me at Camp Randall. This is a win for Wisconsin. And then we have our third game. Here's your head scratcher. This one could be a tough one to figure out. Number 3 Clemson at number 12 Florida State. Clemson is favored by 4.5 to 5 points. This is the head case championship of 2016, Carla, or maybe we could slide Tennessee in there and play a 3-way round robin or something. But these two, what do you think?
Yeah, everything on paper says Clemson wins this game and wins this game easily, right? Because they're up 2 games in the ACC. Over the Noles. They're coming in after a very well-timed bye to get a couple guys back from injury. And they just got back Deshaun Watson's favorite wide receiver in Hunter Renfrow. He came back right before the bye week. So yeah, you look at this and you look at Clemson and you look at the offense and you look at the way that they played against Louisville, and everything says Clemson wins this game pretty easily. But you have a Seminoles team on the other side that's actually playing with a bunch of desperation here, because if they don't win this game, their season's over. They'll get to a bowl game, but they have zero chance of going anywhere lofty if they lose this game, because then they would have 3 losses, and that's going to be 2. And with losses to both Louisville and Clemson, they're done, right? So there is a little bit of a desperation play here. Dalvin Cook's still Dalvin Cook. How is Clemson's rush defense? We're going to find that out pretty quickly. But what's interesting is you had the freshman quarterback, right? In excuse me, in DeAndre Francois, name of the year. And you look at his stats, right? So I went back and I looked to see how he played in these big pressure games, right? They have 2 losses. And against Louisville, he only threw for 101 yards, which is indicative of how good the Louisville defense was that day. But then they lost in that wacky game to North Carolina, and he actually had a pretty decent game. I mean, he had over 300 yards passing, and Florida State actually outgained Carolina in that game, which is interesting. So is that a sign of maturation for Francois, or is that just kind of a fluke, or difference in scale of game? I get that. Like, I don't think Florida State was anticipating the North Carolina game to be as tight as it was, or to lose the game. They went in with a lot of energy against Louisville and got crushed. So here we are again with that high intensity, high profile game under the lights at home. How is the freshman really going to respond to this? We don't really have anything to compare it to other than the Louisville game, and he didn't play well at all. Is he ready to step up and try to play spoiler here for Clemson's season? I don't think so yet. I think next year he will have a really great shot of kind of messing up the whole ACC. but I think this year Clemson's just ready to go again this year. I think this game is close for a while. I think Clemson pulls it out in the end. Should be mildly. It should be an entertaining game. But it actually could be relatively low scoring depending on how the Clemson defense shows up. But yeah, if Clemson loses this game, I don't think you can qualify this as Clemsoning. Florida State is too good of a team. This is not a Clemsoning situation like right. 2 weeks ago was. But I still think Clemson, this is your year again. They're going to get the win this year. Again. Because last year.
Again. See, it's not again. It's that thing you have to add at the end there because we've seen this in so many times frequently. It's really easy to it's tempting to write off Florida State with 2 conference losses already. I wonder if what they walked into in Louisville. That feels like something. I don't want to say fluky, but they walked into something that is arguably the biggest game in the history of Louisville Cardinal college football. Yeah. Hi, Charlie. And maybe they're not prepared for that mentally. You're not expecting the kind of buzzsaw hello that they ran into, and that can explain a poor performance. That can explain kind of momentum and get steamrolled a little bit. I am still both these teams, Clemson and Florida State, especially Clemson, just insanely talented. And if we were talking about this game at the outset of the season, you were thinking this is sort of like de facto ACC championship.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked out that way, but I think the notion that that with a loss, Florida State is looking for a military bowl berth or what's the one in Nashville? What did you say?
Music City Bowl.
Music City Bowl. Thank you. I don't think Florida State gets especially excited about going to Music City Bowl. Although as I know now, Nashville's an awesome place, but I don't think that's what Seminoles have in mind.
Right. Right.
I still, and I think I see enough issues with concentration with the stuff here with Clemson, and granted, it happens with Florida State too. That's why this game can be a little bit tricky to pick at home with the backs against the proverbial wall. I'm gonna pick Florida State to win this one, and we'll see what happens with the ACC from that point forward.
It's interesting to say. It's interesting that you brought that up because as disappointed as Florida State would be with a berth in the Music City Bowl, where we started the show this week with me being optimistic that Penn State could get an Outback Bowl berth. I mean, that's just a difference. It's a difference in the mindset of the fan base and of the program, right? So an Outback Bowl berth. I know that's not possible because they're an ACC team, but an Outback Bowl berth, or would it be? I can't remember how the bowl bids work. Is that an ACC bowl?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
I have no idea.
I haven't looked into it lately. Yeah, I'd have to go look it up. But either way, so an Outback Bowl berth would feel disappointing to a Florida State contingent. Mm-hmm. Feels like an awesome season to Penn State. It's just kind of one of those. That's the kind of wild and wacky world we live in, based on your fan base.
Oh, and it's just. I mean, it's relative to where the programs have been recently. Certainly Penn State's circumstances are unique in the history of the game. And for them to pick up the win they get against the number 2 team last weekend. The opportunity to get through the rest of the season with a nice record, finish in the top 25, get yourself maybe a New Year's Day bowl if the stuff works out okay. That's absolutely something to be excited about, given everything that the program's been through for the last few years. The last thing I'm going to ask you, Carla, put you on the spot pick. We are in the 5th inning of Game 2 of the World Series. The Cubs, Jake Arrieta's on the mound. Cubs are up 5-0, so you assume that we end tonight with the series tied at 1 game apiece. Who wins the World Series?
That's a great question.
You knew I was going to ask this. Come on.
I did, and I've been going back and forth on it because because I was really impressed with how well the Indians started last night. That was really, really an impressive way to get started. Assumed that the series was going to go 1-1 tonight, just because with Arrieta on the mound, that was probably going to happen. Having been a Western PA girl, my heart kind of says Tribe wins this thing, but I think I like the pitching better. I think the pitching matchup is better long term for the Cubs. So I think if Cleveland could win 2 games consecutively in Chicago, which is a tough task, but if they could and they go up 3-1, I think then all of a sudden it shifts in their favor with the matchups, because then Chicago's playing the role of desperate, trying to extend the series. The Indians need this to be a short series to be able to win it, and the way this is playing out, the fact that it's 1-1, I don't see it being a short series. I think it goes 7, which would be really interesting, because that game would be in Cleveland. But I don't know. I like the Cubs pitchers.
Okay, I'm thinking 7. And I think I am putting my faith in Terry Francona and how well he manages pitchers. The assumption in here, outside of the series, was that Corey Kluber was going to go Game 1, Game 4 on short rest, and Game 7 on short rest. I think if there's a manager in the major leagues who can ask a pitcher and manage a pitcher to the point where he makes 3 appearances in the World Series as a starter, it is Terry Francona. And the Indians do have the kind of the bullpen, especially if you're in a situation like in Game 4 and you need to keep his pitch count down a little bit. We can do that. So I'm going to say the Indians in 7.
Okay. Well, if it goes 7, you'll have the advantage because you're playing at home.
Yes.
It's just whether or not. I mean, the Indians need to take 1 in Chicago, and that's going to be tough because that's going to be an electric atmosphere. So yeah, that'll be interesting. So if it comes back to Cleveland, and it's what would be a 3-2 series at that point, I think you're in good shape.
We will see. Indians in 7. Carla, thank you very much for a short and sweet Carla and Crafty show. That was mostly, let's be honest, mostly the Carla show this week.
Yeah, it was kind of fun talking to you when you're staring at the television. I'm like, hi.
Is it that obvious? It's okay.
It's very obvious. Yes.
Okay.
It's all good.
Guys, thank you.
Good.
Oh yeah, we'll be probably maybe. What day would be Game 7? Was that be Wednesday?
I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Oh man, we can't do this. I'm turning on the Game 7. There's no way. There's no way. We'll figure that out next week, guys. Thank you for watching. We will talk to you then.